For Moving Traditions, this is At 13, a podcast exploring what it really means to prepare for and become a bar or bat mitzvah. I'm Sara Ivry, and today we're talking about bum-ba-da-bum, your changing body, puberty, and the social expectations that affect today's kids.
We have our midlife crisis at 13. Who else does this to their children? I mean, it's 16 in America you can drive. 18 you can vote and smoke. 21 you can drink. 13 years old in Judaism, you're a man. Talk like Mickey Mouse, but you're a man.
That's comedian Joel Chasnoff.
And it's the ideal day to have everyone you've ever met come take pictures of you, isn't it? Because you're so beautiful when you're 13 years old. Hey guys, get your cameras. I've got zits, braces, peach fuzz mustache, no armpit hair, speak like a frog, mazel tov, thank you.
We can laugh now, sure, but when you're living with it, that spotlight as a 13-year-old Jewish boy or girl, it can be agony.
It's a time of change. It can be very scary, but it's a really wonderful place to be.
That's Sarah Voigt of Puberty Concierge. That's an organization that helps preteens navigate adolescence.
It means more opportunity. It means more autonomy, more responsibility, but with that comes more freedom. And it's the ability to learn who you are, what you like, who you want to become. And that's a very powerful place to be.
In the ancient world, physical maturation was supposed to align with spiritual maturation. Here's Rabbi Daniel Brenner.
It seems that already 2,000 years ago, there was the beginning of some kind of recognition of the age 13 and a day for boys and 12 and a day for girls, a little bit different based on puberty and maturation. But at that time, there was some type of public recognition ceremony when either the child was called up in front of the congregation or the parent of the child was called up. But for the most part, there is very little evidence of anything other than the father saying an obscure blessing when his son is age 13 and a day. And the blessing that the father says to me is just fascinating.
What is it? Tell us. Dine it out.
So the blessing is thanking the Holy Blessed One for releasing me from any liability associated with my son.
Wow.
So it is a very intense, psychologically an intense thing to say in a public prayer quorum, to say, okay, I've just completed my responsibility as a father. I've taken care of my son to this point. Now, whatever my son does, he is liable for.
At 13.
At 13. What he says, the promises he makes, the vows he makes, he needs to stand behind those words. If he takes something from someone else, he has to repay that person. If he does something worse, he needs to be punished by the community. I mean, that is a very intense type of responsibility. But I think that says a lot about how in the ancient world they looked at the beginning of teen life. That, okay, your words now are really your words.
In the ancient Jewish world, girls were considered adults at the age of 12 and a day. Boys, on the other hand, weren't considered adults until they were 13 and a day. Now, boys and girls both have their bar and bat mitzvahs at the age 13. So what I wonder is, how do gender differences affect becoming a teenager? I talked to journalists and psychologists who have spent decades studying boys and girls at this specific age. Here's Dr. Andrew Smiler.
Most of them want to belong. They want to have a group of friends, concerned about where they are in terms of the social ladder, really working to be at the top or near the top. Some of them by 12 and 13 already having kind of given up and recognizing that they will be towards the bottom as boys are shifting from middle school to high school. What it takes to fit in is also shifting. So perhaps a lot more thought or discussion about, would I ever try alcohol? What kind of risks might I take as far as maybe being disrespectful or maybe getting a fight in the hallway or on the playground? Some of those kinds of behaviors that adults think of as antisocial or inappropriate.
Part of his work is helping parents become more aware of the day-to-day concerns their sons have.
Some of them are really concerned about their looks and their appearance. Certainly we know a lot of 12 and 13-year-olds are hitting acne. It's part of puberty there. A number of them want to be well-dressed. They want good bodies. They want to be cut, and they're starting to talk about going to the gym. Some of the guys who are perhaps more focused on their sexual abilities, so at 12 or 13, these might be the guys who are a little bit ahead of the curve, might be worried about the size and shape of their penis. Some guys are very focused on school or sports or music or some other activity, and so that's what they're really worried about, and they're not so much into dating yet.
How much responsibility, how much adult responsibility, that is, should we give kids at this age or expect from them when they're 12 or 13?
I encourage parents to start giving their kids an allowance. I like it when that allowance is tied to completing chores. At 13, there's a good chance that there are some things he wants to buy, whether that's sports memorabilia or a new video game or whatever. Or maybe he, just always wants to be able to buy a slice of pizza on his way home from school. Whatever, but he starts to get those kind of experiences with earning money and saving money or spending money that form the basis of some future habits. There's some responsibility for a cell phone, keeping it in good shape, but then does that get turned off or turned in at some point in the evening in order for the boy to be going to sleep at a reasonable time? How much privacy does he get on that cell phone? Do parents know the passcode that lets them into the phone? Can they read his texts? And some conversations about that between the parents themselves and then parents and son, because as we go from 13 and this kind of entry into the adolescent world or the adult world of Judaism, through the teen years, the overriding theme is a shift in the balance of power and control and responsibility from the parents to the teenager. At 16 or 17, he's probably going to start driving, and he may have a job after school. There's ultimately going to be decisions about whether or not to go to college and what college to attend, questions about what courses to take in middle school and high school. And with all of those things, the teens increasingly get more and more control and have more and more responsibility for their own lives.
What about puberty for girls and the experiences that accompany getting your period, shopping for bras, growing hair in entirely new places, and the general chaos and anxiety of growing into a woman's body in a culture that tends to objectify them? For years, Peggy Orenstein has been writing about the social and cultural pressures on girls and women.
I'm the author of Girls and Sex and Cinderella Ate My Daughter.
She wants us to engage girls in a discussion about self-objectification.
Why the culture everywhere around them is pushing them to self-objectify and see that as a source of power, and what the impact of that we know can be on them.
So just how can parents guide their daughters to a place of positive self-esteem and self-discovery? One way is to avoid pushing them to the impossible, that is, to be perfect. Orenstein explains.
They have to be, straight A students. They have to be the editor of the yearbook. They have to be the captain of the team. They have to be doing their bat mitzvah, and they have to do it all effortlessly. It all has to appear effortless and perfect. And there is such fear of even minor failures. So we set up a situation where our definition of success for them and the definition that they absorb is just way too narrow. And there has to be room for mistake and not to be shamed or mortified by mistakes, for failure, for play. So I used to say when I talked about younger girls that the best thing that can happen to your daughter, is to get full-on hit in the face with a soccer ball, which I didn't mean really, I don't want your kid to get hurt, but the idea that you just mess up, fall down, get up, and realize that's not so bad. And that is something that, for girls in particular, is difficult. They're very attuned to the slightest failure.
Adolescent boys aren't known for being reflective about their emotions. So Smiler has a few tips for their parents.
I encourage parents to start talking with boys about their feelings today, whatever today is in your child's life, because kids have feelings and they feel anxious, whether that's first day of school or trying a new activity or, getting ready for some other big performance or big game. And we can talk to kids about what it's like to be nervous. Certainly, as adults, we've all had that experience of being nervous, and we can talk about how you reassure yourself and maybe how you deal with some of that nervous energy and all of the fidgeting that goes along with it. And we don't need to wait for bar mitzvah for those kinds of events to have those conversations. Talk to boys in the elementary years about what does it mean to be somebody's friend. Once boys are hitting middle school age, we can start talking about how do you decide who to trust and how much to trust someone, because relationships shift, say at the beginning of middle school, from being just who you hang out with and who you play with to sometime in high school, who do you trust? Who has your emotional back? In addition to, who do you play games with and who do you spend time with? And we can talk to our sons about those kinds of changes.
And we can normalize that conversation long before adolescence, says Peggy Orenstein.
Starting with naming your daughter's parts when they're babies and normalizing that conversation. Issues of consent and respect should be can be reinforced also from a very early age. When somebody doesn't want to be hugged, you don't hug. When somebody doesn't want to play, you don't play. Those are very easy lessons that can translate over into lessons about intimacy and talking to your child about your expectations around that.
Rachel Simmons reminds us that some early romantic encounters, they happen at bar and bat mitzvah parties.
The parties are also a kind of performance. They're also a way in which people are pretending maybe to be a little bit older or more mature than they are. So to me, it's not a surprise that the coat closet, the bathroom, the back hallways of the synagogue become a place for experimentation and risk-taking, because I think it is a kind of exciting moment that pushes kids to think about a more adult side of themselves. It's hardly as if it's the only time they're ever left unattended. So what is it about the B'nai Mitzvah that seems to, I know I can't be the only slutty girl in the coat closet.
Peggy Orenstein's latest book, Girls and Sex, speaks to the world of romance and sexuality that bar and bat mitzvah age kids are just beginning to enter. Here's what she found.
Young women did feel free to engage in sexual behavior in today's culture, but they didn't necessarily feel free to enjoy it. And that was the big disconnect. And it was a profound one. And I think that particularly in Judaism, where we have some really progressive ideas about sexuality, in some ways, it's a great opportunity to talk to girls about and boys about body image issues, about mutual respect, about consent, about pleasure, about something beyond risk and danger.
She found a study of 300 female Dutch college students to be especially instructive for how to talk to her own daughter, who's now 14.
The Dutch had every outcome we wanted. They had fewer pregnancies, less disease, less regret, more likely to contracept, more likely to know their partner really well, more likely to have enjoyed the experience, to be able to communicate with their partner, all these things. And they said the difference was that their parents, teachers, and doctors all talked to them from a young age very frankly about sex, pleasure, and the importance of mutual respect. And more to the point, which really affected me as a parent, the American parents weren't necessarily less comfortable talking about sex, but they tended to frame all those conversations in terms of risk and danger, where the Dutch parents talked about balancing responsibility and joy. And I think, as a mom myself, I thought, wow, because I know that had I not thought about that or delved into that research, I would have talked to my daughter, and do talk to my daughter, about contraception, about sexually transmitted diseases, about the importance of consent, but I never would have talked to her about these other things.
For children still figuring out their gender identity, a variety of issues can surface.
As he was figuring out at that time, Was he a boy or a girl? Was he trans? What was he?
We talked to Amy about her child, Ilan.
Before even getting to the B'nai Mitzvah itself, he knew what was looming, which was, Ilan would be identified as a boy wearing talit and tefillin, as opposed to as a girl, and would have to kind of make that binary choice at school that was imposed. And that was really fraught.
Amy's a rabbi and Jewish educator. Her family incorporated existing traditions and adopted new ones to make this rite of passage fit for them.
Ilan was just beginning in 7th grade to sort of learn of the term genderqueer and really felt that fit them. And so it was, I'm not a boy, I'm not a girl. And so we decided to kind of make up a term called the mitzvah, which is the apostrophe mitzvah. That means, in Hebrew, in a mitzvah, which is kind of like what it's about. You're in the world of mitzvah at that age. And so that's kind of what we called it, and that's what we put on the invitation. We just said, come celebrate with us as Ilan is called up to the Torah upon reaching the age of mitzvot. And everyone knew what it was and didn't even notice that we were or weren't calling it something.
But Ilan felt troubled by having to choose a certain type of clothing to wear to the ceremony.
Obviously, there's no way around formal dress at the service, but at the party, you can sort of choose how you want your guests to dress. So I deliberately decided that it would be extremely casual dress so that people wouldn't have to get dressed up, because getting dressed up feels more gendered because you don't have a lot of choices. It's either a suit or a dress, basically. So I wore jeans and a T-shirt and sneakers and some makeup, and that felt very freeing.
What did you wear to the ceremony itself?
I tried to find the best gender-neutral formal thing I could. Most of the boys in my grade would wear suits and ties, but that to me felt too gendered. So I just wore some plain black dress pants, sneakers, Converse sneakers, and a black button-down shirt. And to me, even though that still felt a bit masculine, I sort of felt like in some ways I did free myself from the extreme gender binary surrounding, the suit.
Next time in At 13, we get spiritual.
The goal here is to figure out who are you and what do you care about and why does that matter in this moment, and to have our Torah and our tradition be a guide that helps us access that.
That's next time on At 13. The At 13 podcast is produced by Michelle Siegel and me. I'm Sara Ivry. Our executive producer is Rabbi Daniel Brenner. Funding to support At 13 comes from the Jewish Community Foundation of Los Angeles, Crown Family Philanthropies, JUF Breakthrough Fund of Chicago, Michael and Carol Lowenstein Foundation, and the many individual donors who support Moving Traditions. The At 13 podcast is powered by Moving Traditions, a nonprofit organization that helps teens grow into healthy, connected Jewish adults. You can learn more about our Bar and Bat Mitzvah initiative at movingtraditions.org.